this should be really not surprising to anyone covering this, but Boris Johnson, and especially these Tory Brexiteers that are now running the government, have and always have been completely clueless when it comes to the world around them. They seem to be under this continuing notion that somehow Britain is this magnificent country when it doesn't. Much of Britain's wealth and influence all came and stems back to its British Empire. Now, a lot of these Tory Brexiteers were brought up on the myths of how wonderful and how great the empire was, but don't seem to understand that that is not the case now. We may be the sixth largest economy today, but that ain't going to happen for too much longer. Indeed, it's very probable that India will probably be taking that spot soon and will be probably knocked down as well. The whole reason we were in the European Union to begin with was because our economy was suffering because of decolonialism. And we're going to be put back in that exact same spot. Lots of businesses rely on being in the European Union and being in the single market. That is going to have huge consequences because that's modern capitalism. That's modern trade. But the Tories just don't understand that. And we've seen this with the dealings just this week with the whole internal market bill. So today's article we're going to go over comes from The Guardian. And it's, this government's Brexit ignorance is steering us towards disaster. There is so much this government doesn't know, but two particular areas of ignorance exploded into view this week, allowing us to take a long, hard look at the cost they are inflicting on this country. And both are central to the Brexit project that remains this government's defining mission. But only one of them is actually surprising. So start with the unexpected ignorance, which is of the US and US politics. It's a surprise because if there's one thing that unites the British political class, it's an interest in and even an obsessive fixation on the politics of the United States. And yes, I plead guilty to that as well. If you were to hold a nerds convention on the West Wing or even House of Cards, you'd hold it in SW1. The Westminster villager, who struggles to identify a single German politician besides Angela Merkel, will speak with ease about the latest polling from Maine or the 2nd Congressional District or the precise composition of the Wisconsin Supreme Court. That's doubly true of a certain kind of Brexiteer. The type who bangs on about the Anglosphere. These are the folk who couldn't wait to be shot of the Continentals and embrace our true cousins across the Atlantic. Such a notion may defy the laws of geography. Nations trade most with their nearest neighbours. How many times have we been saying that on this channel? Again and again and again. This whole thing is what's called trade gravity. Countries always trade most with their closest neighbours. That is not going to change after Brexit. But it turned into policy, as Conservative ministers promised that we'd make up for the lost advantages of the European single market by reaching a sparkly new trade deal with the US. When Boris Johnson campaigned for the Tory leadership last year, his team was briefed on what would have been an agreement with the US done and dusted with within months. And we've already gone just how bad that agreement would even be. And it's surprising, though, that we have Brexiteers, even Brexit supporters, who crow about how, you know, they want rules and laws made in here by the UK. But if we were to do this deal with the US, we would be taking laws from Washington. You know, I don't understand why they don't think it's okay for the EU to do that, but it's somehow okay for the US to do that to us. But again, logic is not a Brexiteer strong point. So that delusion was shattered once more this week, courtesy of a tweet from the Democratic presidential nominee, Joe Biden. He said, "We can't allow the Good Friday Agreement that brought peace to Northern Ireland to become a casualty of Brexit," he wrote. "Any trade deal between the US and the UK must be contingent upon respect for the agreement and preventing the return of a hard border. Period." A Tory chorus turned on Biden, accusing him somewhat audaciously of ignorance, of wading into an area he did not understand. In doing so, his accusers revealed less about Biden's deficiencies than their own. Because it would have taken only the lightest Googling to see that Biden, a former chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, has decades-long interest in Ireland and anchored in the pride he takes in his own Irish ancestry. His speeches are peppered with words of Irish poets. Last month, he closed out his acceptance address at the Democratic Convention by quoting Seamus Heaney. As a teenager, he worked on his stutter by reciting Yeats. Perhaps the Brexiteers can be forgiven for not knowing more about Biden, but their ignorance runs deeper. All that fantasy and talk of a rapid trade deal signed with a pro-Brexit Donald Trump failed to appreciate that the US does trade deals very slowly. Chances are, and even a re-elected Trump would not be in the Oval Office by the time an accord was ready for a signature. More importantly, Trump's approval was never going to be enough. Trade agreements have to be ratified by both houses of the US Congress. And Brits tend to prioritise the White House or the intelligence agencies. There on Capitol Hill, the real special relationship is, not as Tory nostalgists imagine, between the US and Britain, but between the US and Ireland. It might be about roots, as it partly is for Biden. It might be about pleasing Irish American voters, as perhaps it is for House Speaker Nancy Pelosi of San Francisco. It might be about the extremely effective Irish lobby, which cultivates links in Congress for decades. And the British tend to prioritise the White House and the intelligence agencies. Put simply, the Brexiteers may know their Frank Underwoods from their Jed Barats, but they've long failed to understand that no US-UK trade deal is ever going to happen unless the Irish dimension is resolved to Dublin's satisfaction. Which brings us to the second point of ignorance, one that is both less surprising and far less forgivable. I refer to a British Tory casualness, the lack of interest in and sheer boredom when the matter of Northern Ireland and recall Johnson's comparison of the border between Ireland North and the South to a congestion charge boundary that divides the London boroughs of Westminster and Camden. Recall too his treatment of the Democratic Unionist Party, promising no border down the Irish Sea, then signing a withdrawal agreement that entails exactly that. Only now to propose a bill that would break the very treaty he has just signed. Underneath is the deepest ignorance of all, the willful refusal to see the conundrum that Brexit poses. Put simply, if the UK leaves the single market and the customs union, there has to be a meaningful border and border checks between the UK and the EU. That border either divides the island of Ireland, reflaming the conflict healed by the Good Friday Agreement, or it falls in the Irish Sea, separating Northern Ireland from Great Britain, and thereby splitting the United Kingdom. Where do you put the border? Asked Jonathan Powell, who, as Tony Blair's Chief of Staff, worked for a decade on peace in Northern Ireland. He said, "It is absolutely insurmountable. There just isn't a solution." This was the ignorance at the very heart of Brexit, the failure to realise that ending the Troubles was possible only because Ireland and the UK were in the same supranational entity. thereby blurring that border between North and South and allowing those in the North to identify as British or Irish or even both. The Good Friday Agreement was built on that fundamental European foundation, but this key point was always lost on Johnson and the Brexiteers, and most of them couldn't care less. Ignorance of the land across the ocean, ignorant of the land across the sea. This government is bent on Brexit, is causing to crash us on the rocks, and they cannot even see it. And I 100% agree. But this is nothing new. This is nothing new. As someone who is a Remainer, we warned precisely about this exact thing happening. And if you can rewind it all the way back to the referendum, not a single Brexiteer said that this was going to be an issue. They said it'd be easy, it'd be done. It's done, simple, dusted. I think because many of them, remember, the Leave official position was that staying in the customs union and single market was an okay idea. That was something that was an acceptable form of Brexit. Why aren't we going for that? Is that not going against the will of the people? But who knows at this point? Who knows? But this is just how it's all packed up in. It is a point that the Brexiteers just cannot fix, and it is simply impossible. You either have that border between the North and the South in Ireland, or you have it in the Irish Sea. There are no ifs and or buts about it. That border must go somewhere. And unless the Brexiteers have a solution to it, oh, by the way, the withdrawal agreement was the solution proposed by Theresa May's government, and even Boris Johnson signed up to that agreement by signing the withdrawal agreement, is now reneging on that. So what Johnson intends to propose, who knows? But like I say, that's that. Please do like, share, and if you are new, subscribe to the channel. It helps out tremendously. If you would like, also, there are links down below to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link. And as always, we'll see you all next time.